Welcome to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer on TV ARCANA. Today we're very fortunate to have a gentleman who is to me one of the legends of World Series cricket. He has Macedonian parents, also born in WA, but is truly a boy from the Bankstown backstreets who has a lot to say about both cricket and life in general. That's Len Pascoe. There's so much to talk about in terms of your life. Obviously back to the cricket days of World Series cricket, but we mustn't forget that you've got a lot that has happened post that as well. Let's start with your time with cricket and more so your upbringing. Tell us about the way cricket came to you.
Well, I was playing cricket on the farm with my cousins. My first cricket ball was a rock with a rag tied around it, which my mother had sewn together. My first football was the bladder of a sheep or a pig or something or other. And I would play with my cousins. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just running around like any young bloke. But really, I got more into cricket when we come across the Nullarbor plain when I had my birthday on the Nullarbor. And I still recall it as if it was yesterday. There we are in a black Plymouth motor car, and my mother yelling at my father because she thought that we were going into Devil's Country or something because she saw a dead wombat and didn't know what it was, and there was screaming going on. And in the middle of all that, it was happy birthday, Len, at 6 years of age. And once we got to Petersham and Port Kembla and Auburn, but it was at Petersham I just had this yearning to be around trees and grass and just climbing trees and just running around. And there at Petersham Oval I would watch the cricketers in their whites come running to the fence, and the vision of this guy with the brightest red face that I've ever seen. Who was to know that some 10 years later that I would actually be playing for Bankstown in first grade there at Petersham Oval.
Amazing. Now you also talk to me about a lot about the brick laying days or the brick carrying days. Well, tell me about that.
Well, my dad would look at my exam results and thought that I had a future in brick carting. And for those who don't know, brick carting, we would put by hand 2,000 bricks on the truck, which we called the wagon, and 2,000 bricks off the truck, and we would do 4 loads a day.
Oh my gosh.
And there I was as a young bloke, 10, 11 years of age, and rather than roaming the streets, my father would take my brother and I and go brick carting. And the greatest moment of my brick carting was when the draggers who would bring the bricks out from the kilns all covered in dust, they would have this game of cricket at lunchtime, and they would pass on the odd little hint. Unfortunately, all the batting hints that they gave me, I passed on to Glenn McGrath, and wasn't he a success at batting? But it was those early days of brick carting. In fact, after I'd left school, I remember I needed some time off to play cricket. And prior to that, I was working for the Commonwealth Bank, and Alan Davidson was at the Commonwealth Bank, so he organised for me to have some time off to play cricket. But I got in a little bit of trouble, actually not very far from this studio, where I was working in the bank, and I was taking out 2 chemist girls at the same time until they found out, and that put me in a rather awkward position. So I thought, well, I really want to play cricket. Went back onto the truck with my father, and this time now I'm 17 years of age and I got muscles on my muscles, and I was really strong. And Bill O'Reilly, the great Bill O'Reilly, he was a director of the Lion Tile Brick Company, and he walked past, a big tall man, 6'5", 6'6", and he'd say to me as I had 1 foot on the wagon and 1 foot on the stack, with my father yelling at me not to chip the face bricks, the ones that they put so that people can see. And Bill O'Reilly, he'd say, "Keep working on that back, son, you're going to need it one day." And then finally, we were in the office and he says to me, "What sort of bowler are you?" Well, I gave him the entire collection of War and Peace on what I could do as a bowler. And then he stopped me and he said, "Len," he said, "all you got to do is keep that seam upright and hit the keeper's gloves as hard as you can and aim it off stump." That's what I told Glenn McGrath. That's what I told Stuart Clark. And I'm a level 3 coach, and that's all I tell the kids. There's not a great deal of science about it, but if you can do that, consistently. The ball has a mind of its own, and the batsman at some point, he'll crack and you'll get the wicket. It's when you try to do things that aren't on, or you get too smart for yourself. But I've got to thank Bill O'Reilly for that.
It's amazing advice. In fact, for our young viewers, that's particularly good advice. I would like to have heard that as a bowler in my young days. Now, let's turn to some of the people that you've come across in your life, in particular as a boy with Jeff Thompson. Not only your punch bowl days, but also in that era. Tell me about that. He's obviously a great mate of yours.
Oh yeah, Tomo's a great mate, and some things I can tell on camera and some things I can't. But Tomo, first time I come across him, I was playing for North Bankstown Public School, and he was playing for Connell Park Public School. So we would have been probably about 9 or 10 years of age, and there we were up at Graff Park, and I took 5 wickets that day, and he took 6 wickets that day, and we didn't come across we didn't come across each other again until we went to Punch Bowl Boys High School, and it was there in sixth form, which was the first year of high school. I got graded in the team, but Jeff was graded in the house cricket because they thought he had a funny action, and he was breaking bones and all sorts of things in house cricket. And I recall bowling in the nets, and our music teacher was our cricket coach as well. And I bowled one, and it was pretty good. And I said, "How'd you like that one, fans?" And Mr. Clark, his name was, big a Maori Islander. He's called me over and he's gone, "We are not your fans and never will be." And with that, he sort of brought me down to ground level. I'm in his music class, and I couldn't tell the difference between crotchets and wavers. And he just signalled me out and hit me over the back of the knuckles with a ruler. And that was the end of my musical career until many, many years later when I started MDing and Johnny Cash shows and Elvis shows. So I got my own back on Mr. Clark later on, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, we certainly will, and about your daughter as well, which is a very important part of the show, the beauty of her voice.
Actually, that's Charlotte. I treat her as my daughter. My daughter, she's an artist and she's a conveyancer, and we're kind of like oil and water. We're alike in many ways, and we're always at each other's, and I see a mirror image of myself in her. But Charlotte, she is just sensational. I was doing this job for the AMP Financial Planners. It was a speaking job, and we had some entertainment there as well. And I'm a big fan of encouraging young people, whether it's the cricket or their sport or whatever it is. Dreams don't cost anything, as Jimmy Cassidy said recently, the great jockey. And unknowingly, I was doing that for these young kids. I was giving them the dreams to reach for. And this mother came up to me and she said, "I have a daughter that sings." Well, I've heard this before. I've got a cricketer who can play, who can bowl, or he can bat. And I said, "Look, send me a DVD of her singing." Well, I was just blown away at 14 years of age. She was just spectacular. Charlotte Warner. And I said, "That's it, no more talent contest. When you work for me now, you'll get paid as a full-time artist, but you're going to learn from the ground up. You're going to learn the sound system. You're going to learn about desktop publishing. You're going to understand when someone books you what responsibilities you have, not just turn up and expect to get paid." And she just put a mind to it. And all I was doing was the same principles that I'd been playing my cricket with. You don't arrive at a cricket match and wonder whether you've got all your studs on your boots. You don't arrive with one pair of socks. You don't arrive with one shirt. You don't put your cricket bat where your studs are going to damage the bat in your kit. You're going to have all the things you need so there are no surprises on the day and you can stay focused. Well, Charlotte went on to become a graduate of the Talent Development Program, which is the best of the schools, and she's now a professional entertainer. And in fact, she sang the national anthem for the induction of Steve Waugh and Sachin Tendulkar at the Bradman Medal a couple of years ago.
At the SCG, it was a great event.
It was a
actually.
big event.
And that's a great story for the future on these shows we have on TV ARCANA, is around Charlotte. Back to the cricket now, back to World Series cricket. Now, you've talked about the moment you were with Jeff Thompson at a young age. Let's transcend World Series cricket. Tell us about your experiences there through the eyes of a cricketer.
Well, it was Jeff Thompson who called me and said, look, come over to my place. He lived at Connell Park. I was at Greenacre at the time. And he said, there's a guy here I want you to meet. His name's Austin Robinson. So I went there with my wife. We only just got married on 2nd of April, one day after April Fool's Day. She wouldn't let me have it on the 1st.
Thankfully.
But anyway, it was all laid out, World Series cricket. And I asked a million questions. And at that stage, I thought this was an adjunct to the existing season. Like, we're about to tour England, and when we come back, I thought it was going to be for a short period of maybe 3-4 weeks where we'd play this competition, but we're never expecting that we would be all banned. So over we go, over to England, and we're playing the first test. And I've got a pretty good idea who the others were that played World Series cricket, like Tony Greig, for instance. Tony was copying heaps in England after the announcement was made that they were about World Series cricket. But at that time, the decision that I made was, if I'm going to play for Australia, I want to play with the best team for Australia. And when growing up, I'd see Ian Chappell, I'd see Dennis Lilly, and I also wanted to, bowl with my mate Tomo. Because we smashed a few bones and legs at Bankstown, let me tell you, and in school days. And Tomo said, just sign the bloody thing, just sign it, you'll be right. And with that, they handed me over $7,500. Now, we go over to England. The contract, incidentally, was 22.5, so I got the first payment, which up front, which I bought a Tirana. So I thought, if the thing folds up, at least I got a car. I give it to the wife while I go to England, and Elaine, a scrap metal truck runs in to the back of her and wrote the thing off. So that's how I remember. And so here we are, we're playing the first test, the Jubilee Test at Lord's. And Tomo's opening the bowling, he's coming from the members stand, I'm coming from the nursery. The first couple of balls I did not feel at all. I was like I was gliding in. Thank goodness they landed on the wicket. But Tomo took the first 3, and then they brought me behind Tomo, because my style of bowling, you could bowl me into the breeze as a stock bowler, and then you could bowl me down breeze as a express, damage bowler. So Tomo would bowl his 5, I would bowl, say, 4, and then and Max Walker would come on from that end, and then I would come down breeze from the nursery end from Tomo's end. Anyway, my first wicket was Tony Greig. The big fella, he walks to the crease. And I recall Tomo getting with a century crusher in Brisbane. It was straight into his foot at about 100 mile an hour. And I thought, well, I think I might just give him one little bit of chin music and get him on the back foot, and I'll give him the century crusher. And next thing I know, stumps are gone everywhere. So Tony Greig was my first wicket.
And that's a memory to have, certainly. First of all, on Lord's, and the experience of walking onto that ground must have taken you aback. Tell us a bit about that experience. You talked about the game itself, but what about the experience of first entering the ground as a player?
Well, you enter the ground and you go to the nets, and you're not knowing whether you're going to play or not, because you're in a group of 15 or 16. And when you're in the team, then the reality sinks in, and then you've got to trust your training. You've trained hard, you've got to trust in it, and you've got to have confidence in your fellow players. And because I played so often with Tomo, to me it was just like another game of cricket, only the stakes were a bit higher.
Very comforting, actually.
I tell you what, it's surreal to be meeting the Queen.
Oh, God, yeah.
And you're out there lined up and you're meeting the Queen, and then she's up there in the box and you're bowling and she's looking down at you. Another thing that sort of, we grew up with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and that. So here we are at Lord's. Who comes into the dressing room but Mick Jagger?
Wow.
I didn't know whether to shake his hand, curtsy or bow or what to do. It was just such a thrill to meet Mick Jagger as well. So I've gone from the back streets of Bankstown with my hotted up cars and Monaros and everything to Lord's, and you're in the long bar and you look around to see if anyone's looking. I said, that's it, I'm going to wear my stubbies and my thongs through the long bar at Lord's going towards Bradman. And that was sort of the memories that I have of Lord's. But in that first test, Ted Dexter, Lord Ted Dexter, he come out in the papers and said that I was a chucker. And then he had photos of Ian Metcalfe, and they flipped them over and they said, can't tell the difference, he's a chucker, he's a chucker. And I got Dickie Bird comes up to me in his Yorkshire accent, which is I think half Sri Lankan, half Yorkshire when I do it. But it said, he said, laddie, he said, there's nothing wrong with your bowling action. It's not real good Yorkshire, is it?
No.
No, but he put me at ease knowing that the umpires were there. So we go into the second test, and I'm dropped for the second test. They brought in 2 spinners, and that's fine. I thought that's a bit of pressure off me. The third test, we're at Nottingham, and I'm due to bowl. Now, at that stage, there was a guy running around. He was a mass murderer or something, some sort of a ripper, and I thought, oh God, we're already getting some letters. Some of the letters had death threats. Oh yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I'd go in the room and I'd put the chair up and all that sort of stuff. And well, as it turned out, I took in the afternoon when we changed over. It was an incredible game because we lost some very early wickets, and it was Ian Botham's first match. And it was Jeff Boycott's return match after being retired. And Kerry O'Keefe was batting like Bradman out there. He was hanging in and hanging in.
That's hard to imagine.
Oh, he had his big butt in the air, he had his collar turned up, his shirt undone, and he's got to 49. And a wicket falls. I stride out to the ground. I look at Kerry. Kerry turns his back on me. I'm the last man in, and he's on 49. And I've been rooming with him. He was my first roomie when I played for New South Wales. So when he turned his back, I got the impression that he didn't expect a lot or didn't want to have any conversation. So Mike Hendrick bowls the first ball. He bowls the second ball. And I thought, he ain't that quick. I'm going to get this one out the ground. I got caught second slip by Ian Botham. Kerry O'Keefe was 49 not out. He didn't talk to me for 4 weeks. But anyway, we go out to bowl. And I've taken 3 wickets for next to nothing. And we've got him in trouble, big time. Boycott's left in. The night watchman's gone plus 2 batters. I get back to my motel room and there's a letter under my door. I read it and it's got all those cut out letters from newspapers and books and things. And it said, we are going to get you, look over your shoulder, we're going to cut the tendons of your arms, and we'll cut your manly inheritance off. And it was a death threat. So I thought, well, anywhere I'm going, I'm going to be Tomo's shadow. I need protection here. So we're in the dressing room, and I said to Tom, have a look at this letter. And he starts reading it out in the dressing room. So they all burst out laughing. He said, I don't know what you're worried about. They're going to snipe me and Dennis. And but it did affect me, and it shouldn't have, but it did. And then what happened the next day, Boycott and Alan Knott put on a huge partnership, and we lost that test. But that's some of the pressures that you're under. And in fact, the other time I got a death threat was when I'd retired from cricket and I was commentating on TV. And it was the West Indies versus India. And I'd made a comment about one of the Indian players. He was wearing a turban and he was wearing a helmet over the turban. And I said, well, if he got hit in the helmet, I don't think he would have felt it. Thinking it was a throwaway line. I don't know why I said it. I shouldn't have said it. Anyway, I'm at home and the police arrive at my door. They said, we've just received information that there is a death threat on you, and we're here for security reasons. And
It's an early prediction.
I said, where did the death threat come from? I said, I'd come from Mount Isa. Somebody in Mount Isa. I said, well, why? He said, because you said that India were going to win at that stage it was a World Cup, and not the West Indies. Someone got upset because I said India were going to win it. That's how simple it is to get things for people out there to interpret things, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't continue on with the commentary. I had a couple of stints at radio, but I just found the egos were too big to handle of the people I work with. Some of them would...
As in fellow commentators?
As fellow commentators. Some of them will eat their own young for that extra minute on air. And it wasn't in me to compete for airspace. At the end of the day, was it something that I would have been good at if I'd stayed at it? I'll never know. But those experiences turned me off.
I think you certainly would have been. Having talked to you privately about your speaking career that you've got post-cricket, you certainly would have been. We might go to a break on TV ARCANA Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. Welcome back to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. I've got Len Pascoe here. I just want to talk to you about a few other things, Len, that come to my mind and our discussions. Firstly, the intermingled nature of Test and World Series cricket. That was quite incredible because you literally started both your Test and shortly after World Series cricket at virtually the same time.
Correct. Actually, the discussions on World Series cricket started in the 1977 centenary Test. That was, but I wasn't privy to that. When the Australian team got announced in 1977 for the Jubilee Tour, I'd already been selected for Australia, but hadn't signed up for World Series cricket. I didn't know about it. But it was only a matter of weeks from the initial selection to that. At that stage, I was working for Bankstown Council, and I was their community arts officer, so I was involved in theatrical societies, and I was involved with family daycare, childminding and movie clubs, dance theatres, lapidary clubs, art societies. I was in charge of all that for Bankstown Council.
Which helped you on later on when your career developed.
It's funny how your career goes into that direction, but at that stage, the melding of World Series cricket was announced around about the third Test. Around about that period, we were at Tony Gregg's house, and he had a big marquee tent at the back. And that is when the actual news broke by Alan Shields, the writer of World Series cricket, that night. Wow. And of course, then the papers just went absolutely burlesque. And incredibly, I recall around that August period, I was being called a chucker. That then became elevated because I joined World Series cricket. Tony Gregg got vilified. Greg Chappell got vilified, and it was just absolute, what's the headlines today going to be? And there I am coming down the stairs of the Waldorf Hotel, and Greg Chappell shows me the front page. It's got, on the front page it's got The King is Dead, Elvis had died. And on the back, it's got Pascoe's a chucker. And I thought, that was a short career. But I wasn't, I wasn't affected by the chucking thing, because Ted Dexter come to me and he said, look, it's just paper talk. I just did it for paper, the guy who's writing it, take no notice of it. And we shared a beer and there was no animosities. But that period, our Australian team was in tatters because half of us had signed for World Series, the other half didn't. And we didn't gel as a team. There were other factors going on, and we didn't know whether we were going to be sent home the next day. But the tour did go on, and we weren't very successful, although we did pretty well in the county games. And when we come back to Australia, we were all banned. We couldn't play grade cricket. It was Gary Gilmore. Someone else took him to court, took Cricket Australia to court, and he won the court case. And the Bankstown club then stuck by Ian Davis and myself to play us again in grade cricket.
Amazing. Now, that's an interesting point you're bringing up. 1977, obviously World Series cricket, and also the death of Elvis Presley. That's now 40 years later. And here we are with the ability to talk to you, and I think that's very special to be able to pass that memory through to our viewers. Certainly.
When you're a kid around the back streets of Bankstown and you've got, you're not given any money and you're collecting bottles for the deposit, and finally you get enough to go and see the pictures or the movies, and you go to the local cinema and there's Roustabout or King Creole or Elvis movies. And of course when you're young and you see this stud bloke and he could sing and he was athletic, and so he captured the imagination of us young people. And of course, some years later, I already mentioned the role. You're either a Beatles fan or you're a Rolling Stones fan, and the two shall not meet. And whereas I was a bit of a closet both, and it was a big thrill. I talked to Tomo, and George Harrison would come over to Australia, and he'd ring Tomo up and let's go for a beer. And then other times it would be Cliff Richards from the Rolling Stones, and it was incredible. The people you mix with, and in England they'd often have these social matches, and there you're playing with someone like Hunt, who was a Formula One racing champion, or there'd be the actor from Please Sir or something like that. The people you're meeting every day. And here's a story that is really unbelievable. We've gone to Lord Spencer's castle, and we're going through the castle, and we're getting a guided tour of the residence by Lord Spencer himself. And he was telling us about the furniture being so old and the cost of maintaining a constant temperature, because that antique furniture, you didn't want it to split or deteriorate. So there was all this cost involved in making sure that the artefacts in there stayed pristine. As you go upstairs, there was a big hall, and there were these big windows near the hall. Along the wall are these magnificent paintings. And there was one painting which was really eerie, and it showed a lady of the court. She's there sort of on a settee, but the look on her face was kind of blank. And I said to Lord Spencer, I said, that painting, there's something unusual about it. So yes, she was painted after she'd passed away. And the big windows were in the event of a fire. They could take the paintings out through the windows really quick. So as we're given the tour, there's these photos of Princess, Diana and all the star. So the whole thing was surreal. When I think back on it, I said, how privileged was I, someone who could bowl a fast ball from 22 yards away, from the son of migrants to Australia in the early 1930s, who carved out 1,000 acres in Bridgetown, WA, to live in all the not so salubrious suburbs, although back then they were like country towns. And
The Georges River, the closest.
the Georges River, the creeks, catching tadpoles and frogs, and running around the bush and playing cricket in the side passages with the mates around the corner. To go from that to be at Buckingham Palace and having biscuits with the Queen, the Queen Mother, phenomenal.
It's a dream come true for any young person, especially a young cricketer. Let's just go quickly to World Series cricket once again. This time you talked about the larger-than-life personalities. Talk about some of the players from the World 11, for example. There's some incredible characters like the Imran Khans or the Asif Iqbals. Tell us about the experiences there.
Right. At number 10 was Mike Proctor. Mike Proctor had scored more first-class centuries than Steve Waugh. And when the opening batting is Barry Richards, I mean, unbelievable. First wicket is Viv Richards. You got Desmond Haynes, Hammer Haynes, opening the batting. And then you go down the order, and it's just incredible, the fast bowling. Garth LaRue, Michael Holding, Andy Roberts, Mike Proctor. A lot of them could really bat. Then you get to the wicket keepers like Derek Murray or Alan Knott. Alan Knott had scored a first 100. The world team with Tony Greig was captain. And I didn't mention Imran Khan. You can throw him in there as well.
You certainly can.
And then, it was a genuine best players of the world in that. And here we are, the Australian team, trying to mix it with them.
Okay, imagine yourself at one end, you're coming into bowl, you've got Imran Khan to bat against you. Tell us about that.
Oh, I didn't mind Imran Khan. Imran was a great all-rounder, but he always gave you a chance. The blokes I feared was Viv Richards, because if he could just hit any ball that he wanted, anywhere he wanted, whenever he wanted. But someone said to him, you must need to block a couple, Viv. And I was scared of the bowler killer. It's the one where you bowl and you're coming through, your head's down, the follow-through's there, and the ball's coming back at you off the bat faster than you let it go. In the West Indies, when we toured there, Gary Gilmore asked for a helmet to bowl in. Not from the ball coming towards him. He wanted for the ball that was ricocheting off the bottom of the side screen. So it wouldn't hit him in the back of the head. So, Viv to this day, look, Greg Chappell, the master batsman. Clive Lloyd, majestic. Ian Chappell would fight. You want him in the trenches with you. Jeff Boycott, you just leave him in there because you knew that the bloke at the other end wanted him out more than you did. But Boykers, I really enjoy bowling the Boykers. But Viv Richards, he could destroy you. He could destroy you as a bowler.
Any famous sledges? I'm sure there would have been a few in that little exchange.
Oh my goodness, I've copped a few. Most of them have come from the crowd. One bloke yelled out, if you and Bill Laurie batted together, you'd never get run out, referring to our noses. Another bloke yelled out, if you slid your nose, you would have made it by a yard when I got run out. I'll give Janolan Caves a bowl, he'll get them out. All these comments come from the crowd. And if you turn around and give the crowd some,
You're gone.
You're gone, they're just going to pick on you even more.
How did you get under, did you attempt to get under Viv Richards' skin at all?
My theory with Viv was very simple. Don't give him anything pitched up. Bounce him. If I got one of those through, I would then have the wood on him because he didn't wear a helmet. All I had to do was just get one where it's exploded in front of his face, maybe broke a finger, broke a thumb, maybe, flick him off the melon or something like that. But I was never able to do it because he was just far, far too good. Because if I bowled short to him, it had to be an air shot. And he could take a top edge, he could hit it down finally. Because if I bowled up to him, he would just block one, block two, maybe hit one through the covers, lean across, off the toes, into the fence for 4. And you knew then the horse had bolted and threw it. And you say, well, I think I've had my spell. But with Viv, you had to attack him or he will eat you alive. And in his book, he said the same thing about me. He said, you have to get to Len and bowlers like him before they get to you. So here we had 2 people with the same theory. Get each other before one takes advantage.
But I thought it was interesting that both yourself and Viv, for example, off the field are as humble as anyone I could imagine. The comparisons of on and off field are quite abject. As today, it may not be quite so. Often the characters on the field quite often are that way off the field. There seems to be more of a humbleness to the way that cricketers were of that era.
Look, a lot of it comes down to attitude. When I was 20, up till when I was 25, I was picked for New South Wales at 18 and went surfing. I'd rather go surfing and fishing than playing cricket. There was no money in it. It's a Saturday, But I think it was only when I was 25 that I started to bring the results that others believed that I had. And it was a change of attitude. I said, the batsman isn't somebody who I hate. The batsman is someone who's stopping me from everything I wanted in life. I didn't want a mortgage on my house. I wanted, I wanted to have a weekender. There's all these things that I wanted. But importantly, I wanted to be in control of my time to do what I want to do, with who I want to do it with, and for as long as I want to do it with.
We've talked a bit about your Test career as well as your World Series cricket period in your life. But in terms of what I believe through the eyes of a cricketer, the honour of the baggy green and what it means to you. Tell us about your thoughts there, Len.
When you go through the gate for the first time wearing the baggy green, you feel the ghosts of the past on your shoulders. You realise that you've got to bat better, you've got to feel better, you've got to bowl better, and you realise the people that you're with are also the best in their fields. So there's this incredible feeling knowing that you've gone through the gate that Bradman went through. You're bowling from the end that Lynn will bowl through, or Keith Miller. You sit in the chair that Bradman would have watched the game from. The history and the ghosts of the past flood in. But the best way I can describe the meaning of the baggy green was the Centenary Test 1980 after World Series cricket. I wanted to open the bowling again with Jeff Thompson. So here we are, 1980 Centenary Test, back at Lord's. And I thought, you beauty, Dennis Lilly, Jeff Thompson, and myself, and we are going to hammer these Poms. We're going to give them twice what the West Indies gave them. And we're all primed up. We're in the nets and we're training and the ball's coming out like absolute, on fire. We win the toss. Greg Chappell comes up to me and he said, get loose, you're bowling. I said, what, with Dennis? I said, what about Tomo? He said, Tomo's 12th man. And there was silence. And I'm going up the steps to the dressing room and Tomo's coming down the steps. I said, Jeff, I've just heard that you're 12th man. And I'm going to tell you now, I think I've done a hamstring. Which, if I'd done the hamstring, he would have played in the Centenary Test. Tomo looked at me and he said, if you tear a hamstring, I'll tear one too. Wow. Could you imagine now, you've got 2 players. One is giving up his spot in a place in history, and the other says, no, That is the meaning of the baggy green.
Sensational.
When I went on to bowl, I took 5 for 59. And my name is up on the board up at Lord's with two guys that I coached in Glenn McGrath and Stuart Clark, also up there on the board at Lord's. And the baggy green, to me, is the ultimate as far as playing for Australia. The baggy green also represents that there are a lot of players, don't ever forget, there are a lot of players who are better than you, but they may be driving a tractor out west. They may be doctors. They may be psychologists. Their chosen paths in life was not yours. So don't you think you're better than them? Don't you ever think you're better than them. You are playing for them. In fact, there was one player in the early 1900s who was a phenomenal player. I won't mention his name, but sadly, at a time when he could have played for Australia, he was killed in the Battle of Bullecourt in France. And he never got a chance to play for Australia. So the meaning of the baggy green, when you go out there, you're playing for your mates, you're playing for Australia, and you're playing for those who can't be there and perhaps should be there. That's the meaning of the baggy green.
That's so riveting, to be honest with you. That's a fantastic story. Let's turn it to yourself again, not just the baggy green, but your best achievement, your highest achievement in your mind. Tell us about that.
Look, when it comes to results, we hear of 6 fers, 7 fers, 8 fers, and I've had plenty of those in my cricket. Not skiding about it, but it was this one particular day. Ian Davis, he phones me up and he said, this was during the first year of World Series cricket, the drop-in wickets, where we didn't know if one ball was at your ankle, the other one was at your melon. And he said, there's a guy I want you to meet. He's at Ashfield in Sydney. And they made artificial limbs and helmets and safety gear. And I'm going to be looking at some helmets. So Ian Davis in this office there, we were pulling down all these helmets off the shelf. And there was baseball helmets and all sorts of helmets, mining helmets, all sorts, bike riding. I looked up and I saw a horse riding helmet. I pulled it down and I put it on Ian's head. I said, what do you think of this, Ian? And he said, I like it. He said, can we put a mask on it? And at that stage, the gentleman said, yes, we can put a polycarbonate mask that a .22 bullet wouldn't go through. And so he put it on, and Ian Davis was the first one to wear that helmet, a horse riding helmet with a polycarbonate mask. I was playing up in Gladstone against the West Indies. I went to hook a ball off Colin Croft, hit the button on the horse riding helmet, and I was given out caught behind. I went back and complained to the manufacturer, so they took the button off. But interestingly, Jeff Thompson now, he got banned in World Series. He was World Series, got out of World Series, went back to World Series. Now we've amalgamated again, and we're at the Sydney Cricket Ground number 2. And they wanted to do an example of this cricket helmet with this polycarbonate shield. So here they are, 22 yards. Tomo's at the long run up, and he's going to let them fly at these journos who are going to see what it's like to be behind a 100-mile-an-hour delivery. And they had a polycarbonate shield at the front. And I said to the organisers, I said, before a reporter, journo, gets in there, let Tomo bowl a couple. Anyway, Tomo, in 4 balls, smashed it to smithereens. And that was the end of the polycarbonate shield, and they come back with the wired gauze shield. So when people say to me, what's your greatest achievement? To me, it's in the development of that helmet in conjunction with an opening bat, Ian Davis, and a fast bowler. And when I see players getting hit on the helmet, I wonder, do they know the history of this. You know what? Ian Davis and I never received a single cent, nor did we ask for one. And I'm still very proud of it. So you look at the shape of it now, it's still a horse riding helmet, but obviously they've structurally changed it. But Tony Hansen, who bought the company, he then went on, nearly went broke in it a couple of times. Steve Small, who played for New South Wales, he was a rep for him for a while. And then eventually the Albion Hat Company, who makes the baggy greens, they took it over and marketed it and everything. And of course, it's the success it is today.
What a magnificent story. We're going to break on that point through the eyes of a cricketer. Welcome back to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. Len and I have been talking a lot about his cricketing career, but I think there's a lot to talk about post-career, in particular around everything from his charity work to fishing, which is an incredible part of his life, as well as the work that relates to what I think he's very dear to, his daughter certainly as well, and the greater group of family that he has, the mentoring and the coaching. A lot of the aspects of what his career are all about. Let's start first and foremost with your fishing stories. I rather want to go straight to that to start with. You've got a strong affiliation to fishing right from the days with Jeff.
Well, even before that, in Western Australia, after my father was on the logging trucks, as we mentioned, Dennis Silly's father would chop the trees down, my father would cart them, and then at the end of the day we'd go down to the local creek and he'd go and put a few yabby traps out, and for dinner that night we would have fresh yabbies. Then later on, fishing with my dad in the rivers and streams, and I just grew up just loving that. When, you know, Tomo was also a very keen fisherman, and I remember one particular day I was playing for New South Wales and he was playing for Queensland in the Sheffield Shield, and our practice sessions were over and said, let's go for a quick fish out at Kurnell, and there was this big long jetty out at Kurnell, and he's got his big beach rod and there's all these little kids all lined up, all fishing over the edge, and there's this speedboat going up and down, and Tomo says, I've had enough of this bloke. So he's pulled out his rod, his big, 15-foot rod, with a 20-pound line of the big sinker, and he's whoosh, and he's cast this thing a million mile out in front of the speedboat. Well, of course, what happened was, fortunately, he didn't take one of the kids with him off the jetty. That's how big he was with the cast. Anyway, there's the real smoke, and the next thing you know, this speedboat's it's conked out in the middle with all his fishing line wrapped around it. So anyway, nightfall fell quickly, and we decided to leave. As we're leaving, he's got his the bait bag, a wicker basket, and there's a big jag hook hanging out of the calf muscle. As he's gone over the treated log fence, he's stuck the hook from the jag hook into his calf muscle. It's pretty dark now, and we've got the headlights of the car on. We've destroyed the wicker basket, and there's the lure hanging off his calf. Now, I was a big fan of these outdoor shows, like the Malcolm Douglas Wilderness Show, and also the movies. You know, in the movies, the westerns, they get the hot knife and they do all this sort of stuff, and take the snake bite out. So I've been waiting for this opportunity to try my wilderness, methods. So I pulled out this razor blade, and I said to Jeff, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sterilise it first. So I got the cigarette lighter, put it under the razor blade. It was a bit hot. So there I am at night, and I'm cutting his car, with a skin, trying to get this hook out. And he is screaming and yelling, and I said, yeah, shut up. I said, it's not hurting me. And anyway, he said, bloody, he called me all the names under the sun. He goes home with the lure hanging out of his leg. Mind you, we're playing for New South Wales, Queensland, Sheffield Shield the next day. He has to go to the doctor first. Well, the doctor took the hook out, but he needed 6 stitches where I'd been cutting with the razor blade.
Separate to that.
So to this day, he hasn't forgiven me. He thinks my fishing skills are not really up to scratch. But I've been doing a lot of research, and you know, when we get the opportunity, when we meet up, we like to go and have a fish. Because fishing, I think, is personal. I think to be in a boat with somebody for 2-3 hours, if you don't like them, you ain't going to go out with them. And to me, it's a family thing. I love going out with my son. It gives us a chance to talk and relax and just enjoy the out. To me, it's not about so much about the fish as it is about the experience.
That's why you and Jeff are very close. You've had a lot of great experiences.
Oh, the things you talk about. The last time we went out fishing together, we were down at Baril Lake, a property down there, and we're chucking around these lures, and I happened to have a banana in my lunchbox, and he's brought up a rather large flathead. At which point I said, "Do you want a banana, Jeff?" Handed him the banana, and the flathead swam away, and he's looked at me with a filthy look. He's banana, you know, because apparently there's bad luck. I didn't know it was bad luck, but I do now. But we've fished New Zealand together. We've fished outside together, game fishing, river fishing, estuary fishing, beach fishing. It's a wonderful experience, but I also respect very much the environment, and I respect very much those organisms that live in it. And if I do go fishing, I prefer to use catch and release. If I'm going to be fishing for the table, I'll make sure that I take just what I need. It just gives me an excuse to go out again. And along the way, I've learned how to catch beach worms on the sand, you know, with the stink bag, and I've learned to do that. And now with some friends of mine are on Radio High Tide. We do these fishing road shows around the countryside, and we have these experts with us who teach us how to bait up, and we talk with people and we interact, and it's a wonderful enjoyment pastime.
And again, that's a show for the future, perhaps around fishing for TV ARCANA. There's a very good chance that could be a very good.
Well, we got the people.
All right, now let's turn to your charity work. Now, you've told me about a very special relationship with Sri Lanka. Tell us about that.
3 years ago, I was approached by Dr. Saharsha, who's a palliative care specialist. He operated down at Bateman's Bay and Canberra and St George Hospital. And he come with 2 other gentlemen, and they put forward a concept to me called the Shanti Foundation, and what they were trying to do, and the inaugural events, how to meld in the Australian people and the Sri Lankan people to raise funds for third world countries. The first being is Sri Lanka. What people don't know is the amount of herbicides and pesticides that have been placed into the water chain, into the food chain in Sri Lanka. And there are young people in their 20s and 30s that are dying from kidney-related diseases, of poor quality water, and they're dying without any medications or anywhere to go. And so the Saharsha with the Shanti people have organised various fundraising events, and they've asked me to be an ambassador for Shanti, as they asked also Charlotte. So the first event we did, we raised about $40,000, and that was to kick it off. And then after that, their committees, and they're well connected with the government, both in Australia and also in Sri Lanka. And the most recent project that they're doing is to build a palliative care hospital in Sri Lanka, so that people can actually have dignity in a time of a great need. But it's not just in Sri Lanka. They are looking at third world countries to do more work.
So have you had an experience of actually going to Sri Lanka to see the work that you've been involved with at this point?
You know, they've kept me up to date with so many things that they do, like they have palliative nurses that will venture out into the villages and give the support. And it was eerie to see one of the video clips that showed a gentleman who was in his last stages of his life. And next to him was his wife and his daughter. And they were giving him medication. And they said, is the medication working? Do you need more? And with that, he humbly said, no, I'm okay. You could see he's not okay. But in the background, you see his wife and his daughter, and they had smiles on their faces. And the smiles weren't from, you've got to interpret the smiles as of appreciation. And that was just one typical little family. So when they bring their video clips and then they tell us what they're doing and the photos, and you're meeting the people and the people that are associated with it, who are doing things to raise funds, you start to understand the people. I don't need to be there. All I need to do is give whatever resources that I can to support them.
That's wonderful. I think that's a very special part of your life, and it's very impressive that you talked about it here on the show. Let's now turn just into the side of things which I'm very interested in as well, around the way you mentor players, the likes of Glenn McGrath and Stuart Clark you mentioned before. But more than even that, you're bringing back an aspect of cricket that probably is missed these days, the true way of playing cricket, in my opinion. Let's just share that point.
The passion for my cricket was born from participation as a young person because I just liked the sport. I, as a coach, am of no value unless I give a piece of myself to that individual. And I coach about 3,000 kids over Christmas, have been for about 15 years. If I can't leave a bit of myself with those kids to make them better at whatever they want to be, then I failed as a coach. For instance, with Steve Smith, he's at the Sutherland Club. I'm coaching at the Sutherland Club. At the end of the season, Smithy was a rather rotund little fellow, and he's got long curly hair, and he's got this big earring in his ear. And I'd already recognised by the way he waited to bat. He wasn't pressured, he had plenty of time. I already liked him. And I called him over and I said, Smithy, if you've got two players with similar ability, which one do you think the selectors are going to pick? He didn't have an answer. I said, well, I'll tell you. It's the one that looks like a cricketer and you don't. He went away to the academy, cut his hair, earring gone, lost, I would say, 2/3 of his weight, and he's come back. I looked at him and I said, I like what I see. Excellent. And a few years later, he had glandular fever. And he was coming back. And I'm coaching at Sutherland again. And this time I'm coaching the fast bowlers. So I wanted the best of the fast bowlers to bowl to the best batsmen we had in the club. And there was another player in the adjoining net who was complaining about not having any bowlers. So I kindly told him what he could do with himself. I thought I was bowling again. And anyway, when Smithy finished, I said to Steve, I said, look, the good bowlers are going to suss you out with your technique. If you keep playing the ball on the rise, you will keep nicking them into slips. You're not getting your foot to the pitch of the ball. You're playing too far away from your body. As good a eye as you got, the good bowlers will work you out. Anyway, it was about 2 years later. He's in the Australian team. He gets dropped, comes back. I think it was in Perth or something. His technique completely changed. I don't think it was me that did it. I just think he thought it out. He started playing like Ian Chappell, back and across, and get in line with the ball. So both eyes are right behind the ball. So being a coach is a case of observing and knowing what not to say. Too often coaches want to express how smart they are, and they end up confusing the player. Choose your words very, very carefully. With Glenn McGrath, it was a different thing. I had him and Stuart Clark, and at that stage I'd been retired about 2 years, 3 years. And we were in the nets, and I had the young batsmen in the nets. And I said, we're going to bowl 1 over each. You're going to tell us who's the fastest and who were you most likely to get out to. So the 3 of us went hammer and tack for 3 overs. Afterwards, I said, well, what'd you think? He said, Len, he said, the other 2 were quicker than you, but you had me playing Space Invaders. You had me, he said, I couldn't hit the ball where I wanted. You kept hitting the splice of the bat. And I looked at both of them and I said, now, you are only just quicker than a broken down fast bowler like me, and you can't do what I just did. I want you to get this lesson. Pitch the ball up as far as you can and pass the bat as high as you can. And you can't hit a 4 with the splice of the bat. And Glenn McGrath, if you look back, he was always just short of a length on that off stump, like Bill O'Reilly taught us, and the ball would just travel away, and he would be hitting that splice. And same thing with Stuart Clark.
So that term metronome is very much a part of that discussion.
Yeah, and over the years, with all the kids that I've coached, some of them have given the game away. They come back to me afterwards, and I say, they're doctors or they're something else, but they always remember that time that they were in our cricket coaching clinic.
That's great advice.
But the modern game, as far as the modern game's concerned, this is how I summarise it. I think we should ban the front foot no ball rule. It should be tossed out.
Why is that?
It's causing back injuries. I started in the back foot rule, and I had to adjust to the front foot rule. And I think the big fast bowlers have been hobbled. You want to see that white ball or that red ball fly. You're not going to do it by hobbling the pace bowler. You walk along a path and you stub your foot on a crack. You go head over heels. That's the same thing that happens when you have the front foot no ball rule. Your front foot, when you're coming in to bowl, if you are not in the most stable position to deliver the ball with all the stresses on your body, you will snap stress fractures, muscles, the lot, because you're in a bad position, especially if there's a bit of a hole in that front foot area where your ankle, so you've got ankle injuries, you've got back injuries, you've got muscle injuries. The back foot rule should be brought in. That's the first thing. The second thing is the big bats have to be reined in. The third thing is they've had the grounds are getting smaller and smaller. So it's all about hitting sixes. Well, in my view, it's not all about it. It's about that deft touch to a batsman on the left-hand side, to a fieldsman on the left-hand side, like Boycott did. Or it's that Viv Richards who stands back and slays one through along the ground without any power, but just guides it. Or Asif Iqbal or Javid Miandad, who sits back there and drives one down the ground. To me, it's the spectacle. It's not the end result, which is, it's over the fence, it's a 6. T20 to me should be a picnic match done only as a novelty. The 50 over game now is tired. Should be retired. Good play on words, that one. I think we should be playing 35 over game.
Okay. So a compromise between
50 over game without the blocking. You're giving the batsman time to score runs. You're giving the bowlers time to score, get wickets, and we've got a more realistic game. Get technology out of the game. We've got too many interfering commentators who are using the technology. Apart from having too many commentators, we've got 3 commentators in there, and I just don't see the purpose of that. All trying to get their 2 bobs worth in what is an over of 3 minutes, and they're trying to expand a thought. It's not fair to the commentators. So in my thinking, this business of, oh, was that a no ball? Let's bring the batsman. Here's this great moment, great catch. And then what do? We go to the camera and then they turn around and say, oh, that's not out because there's a no ball. Let the umpire decide whether it's good or whether it's bad. Let the umpire decide. He's human. But when you start bringing in technologies and they're eroding into the game, I find it frustrating. I find it boring. And quite frankly, a lot of it is nothing more than lipstick on a pig.
That's a great way of putting it. That's a magnificent summary of both not only your time as a coach, but also the way that modern cricket has developed and how it's lost its flavour somewhat. Now, I can't help but finish. We've talked about cricket, but I want to bring one aspect of your life in there which really impresses me, is your speaking. And you're everything from the Blues Brothers, your involvement with that, through the Johnny Cash shows. Tell us about that.
There was a comedian by the name of Slim de Grey. And when I was about 14, he was filming a movie called They're a Weird Mob. And it was about a migrant coming to Australia and he's in the building game. And I'm doing a show, I've been invited in a golf day down at Nowra. And I was working with a big tall comedian. His name was Calvin de Grey, which was Slim's dad. And I said, mate, I like what you did. I got this idea about Len Pascoe Sports Entertainment, a website that brings together quality speakers and quality entertainers, and I'd like you to be the first. Have you got your card? Oh, have I got my card? Have I got a card? Have I got a card? He races into the reception, pulls down the poster, and he said, here's my card, and he puts down his phone number. And I thought, oh, gee, I like this guy. Anyway, he introduces me to Brian Doyle, Paul Martell, Wally the Worker, and now the stable of comedians is growing. And I thought, oh, okay. Then one day we're doing this event for 2KY, the radio station, at a place called Shipton Lodge, where the great racehorse Might and Power was on Legisman. On the wagon there, amongst the hay, was a guy doing Elvis. And I said to my wife, I said, I think Elvis could fit into our shows, can't it? Next thing I know, I'm working with Elvis. And then I'm learning the sound so that I can run the music for him. And then he introduces me to Ricky Organ, and Ricky Organ's a Johnny O'Keefe act, and he's a performer. And next thing I know, I've got a stable of 72 entertainers and speakers.
72?
72. In fact, I had the former Miss World, Belinda Green.
Right.
She was on there.
What was she doing?
She was a speaker.
Oh, right.
And it's great for those guys, in their 40s and 50s, and there's Miss World. I thought, how lucky am I to have Belinda here? And
did you cast yourself as Mr. Universe?
No, I was just, I was just a bloke in the background, because I quickly realised from my Bankstown days is if I do one speaking gig, I can't come back again. But if I'm the person who organises them, they'll keep on asking me back again and again. So I still did my keynote speaking and that, but along the way I learnt techniques off the professional entertainers. So that started to meld into my presentations. But one particular night which I'll share with everybody. Now, Slim de Grey, he was an entertainer in Changi, the prison during Second World War. Calvin de Grey, his son, is sitting on my left. Mark Latham, who was the Labor, opposition federal Labor leader at the time, he's there. And on the right-hand side of him is Kerry O'Keefe. I found out that Kerry O'Keefe's dad was in Changi.
Really?
So here we are doing Campbelltown Cricket Club, whose nickname is the Ghosts. I said to Calvin and Kerry, I said, do you realise that you're the sons of two people who were in Changi doing entertainment, and you two now, their sons, are working together doing this?
It's amazing.
And you should have seen the look on Kerry and Calvin. They just went ashen. And Kerry got in touch with Slim de Grey before he passed away and got some more information about his dad.
Fantastic.
And this is where the entertainment world takes you. So today, coming up very shortly, I'll be up at Tea Gardens, a wonderful place. It's a fishing town, it's a holiday town, and I'll be doing an Elvis show. 2 weeks later, I'll be doing an Elvis Blues Brothers show, and that was to raise money for autism. And then I'm working on a Beatles Rolling Stones show, and then along the way a Johnny Cash show, and then I fit in those fishing shows, and because it was Max Walker who encouraged me to go into this field. He said,
Oh, he was legendary himself, wasn't
he said, be the first there, last to leave, your next gig comes at the end of the night. And he said, have you got any idea how many sporting clubs are out there? How many charity events are out there? How many fundraisers, awards nights, presentations, corporates? It was Max Walker, a very good friend of mine. And it was rather sad that I've lost two now. Ricky Organ to myeloma cancer, and in the last 12 months, and Max Walker, who I didn't know had myeloma cancer until I got the phone call 2 days before he passed away from Keith Stackpole.
Wow.
So when you do your charity work, you've got to do them for the right reasons, not as a vehicle to promote yourself and not as a vehicle as business. If you do the charity work, it's not about a tax deduction event. You have to have an affinity with what you're doing.
Well, that sums up, I think, Len Pascoe. The passion of Len, from everything from his great cricketing days to what we've talked about today regarding his speaking tours and all the events that he is involved with charities. A very passionate man. It's been a privilege to have you on the show.
Thank you,
Thanks
Norm.
for being here. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate it.
Cheers.
Come back next time and watch our next great guest on Through the Eyes of a Cricketer.